Greet each one of you in Christ's name this morning. Good to be here with you again. And there's a rabbit trail. We'll go down a couple of them maybe before we get into the message. But the reason we're here is because we were in Belize this summer for a month, filling in at Haines Street, and Delbert wanted our opinion of what the work there is or isn't and what it needs to accomplish. And now I want to continue on your thought, Junior, with we don't know how far a witness goes. The last Saturday night we were there, it was after dark, which it gets dark here fairly early in Belize because, anyhow, someone hailed me at the gate, and so I went out and left him in, and it was a younger man, I'd say in his early 20s, and he said that he wanted to know if we'd bandage his foot, and we did some bandaging. We fixed a few things, or not fixed, but bandaged some sores and wounds that people had. So he came up into the mission house there, and I got some, I think it was B&W and I don't know what all. We were fixing it. He had a sore on his foot. He had some stitches in it. And he said he had just wrecked his cycle that week. Somebody pulled out in front of him and he ran into him. And he said, the doctor said, it's a wonder you weren't paralyzed. And I looked at him. I didn't know the individual. And I said, well, it's a wonder you're still here. Yeah, he said, I could be in a wheelchair. No, I said, it's a wonder you're not in eternity. And he looked at me a while, and I said, you could either be in heaven or hell. Where would it be? And he looked at me a little bit, and he said, you know, everything I know about God, I learned here at this mission. So then after the fact, we were the single girls there, Janice and Carmen. I was telling them about it, and she said, well, who was it? And I said, well, I described him to him. Well, she said, well, he's one of the local gangsters. He's in the gang. And he came in and admitted at that point in life that everything he knows about God, he learned here from Miss Nancy. And we probably all know who Miss Nancy is, or at least have heard her name. So we don't know 20, 30 years later, whenever, however far back it goes, an influence that we will have on someone that will, at that point, reckon with him. Where will you be a million years from now? Will you be happy? Will you be singing? While ages roll throughout eternity, I ask this question, where will you be? Just one life to live on earth, and it quickly passes by, from the moment of our birth to the time has come to die. God has given us this choice to decide our destiny. In a million years, where will you be? In the Bible, we are told of a day that soon will come, when the people of the earth will be gathered round God's throne, and stand before the King, there for all the world to see. Will he say, well done? Where will you be? I ask this question, where will you be? The title of my message this morning is, if you had a year to live. If you had a year to live, what would you do? If you had a doctor appointment tomorrow and he would say, well, Brother Delbert, or Mr. Delbert Slabo, or Mr. Slabo, I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but with the testing that we've been doing and with the results that have come back, you have such and such a disease, and I'll give you 6 months to a year to live. What would you do? How would that look different to you? And I'll tell you where this message all came from. I had worked at a local shop or a company that produced metal, roofing and siding and stuff, and so I was doing deliveries at the time, and my late wife, Lil, would go to the library, and at that time our trucks had CD players. Today that's obsolete, but at that time we had CD players, and she would go to the local library and get me CDs to listen to while I was on the road. And she went to the library there in Mentone and came back with the CD, and it said, if you had a year to live. And she thought it was a religious or a spiritual CD, which it wasn't, but it had some very practical points. And here's what they are. If you had a year to live, what would you do different? Well, here's a list of some of the people, and there's a couple different lists. But here are 9 things that people said if they had a year to live, what they would do different. I would change occupations. I would work less hours. I would pursue a long-desired skill. I would pursue the things I love. I would find my true work, God's plan for me. I would diligently pursue and mend all hurting relationships. Now put that in your think tank and chew on that, because there's three different I woulds, three different series of questions that I have come, or answers that I have given, and every one of them that is mentioned. Where does that reach to in Scripture? I would diligently pursue and mend all hurting relationships. I would adapt a more gentle pace of life. I would stop and smell the roses, or no, I would plant the roses. Just recently I was looking online about this, and this is what this gentleman said. Everyone should go on a walk once a day, intentionally walking where you will meet someone and start a conversation with them. Now the job I had then later after I quit driving, I was in maintenance, and so I would often go to the different businesses in town to get things and parts. And I kind of made that my mission, and it was amazing how many long faces you would see coming out of the hardware, and all you need to do is make one comment, and that face changes. People you never met before. And the result that has, it makes your day brighter, but it also makes their day brighter. It's amazing how often you say someone, "It was a beautiful day this morning," and most people will respond positively as well. But if you had that hanging above you this morning, if you had a year to live, what would you do different? Here's one quote. It says, "More than 70,000 people die every day without a choice to even hear the name of Jesus." 70,000 people are going to die today that didn't even have the privilege to hear about Jesus. Let's turn to Luke chapter 12 for a text. Luke chapter 12. And we'll read from verses 15 to at least 30, maybe even a little further. To get the setting of how a year to us may seem quite long. And with that this morning, I want to interject, and later I will clarify it a little bit. With that, if you had a year to live, how that became became a reality in our life. Let's read from Luke chapter 12, beginning in verse 15. "And he said unto them, Take heed and be aware of covetousness, for a man's life consisteth not on the abundance of the things that he possesseth. He spake a parable unto them, saying, The ground of a certain rich man brought forth plentifully. And he thought within himself, saying, What shall I do, because I have no room where to bestow my fruits? And he said, This will I do. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there will I bestow all my fruits and my goods. And I will say unto my soul, Soul, thou hast much goods laid up for many years. Take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said unto him, Thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. Then whose shall those things be which thou hast provided? So is he that layeth up treasure for himself, and is not rich toward God. And he said unto his disciples, Therefore I say unto you, take no thought for your life, what ye shall eat, neither for the body, what ye shall put on. The life is more than meat, and the body is more than raiment. Consider the ravens, for they neither sow nor reap, which neither have storehouse nor barn. And God feedeth them, and how much more are ye better than the fowls? And which of you with taking thought can add to his stature 1 cubit? If ye then be not able to do that thing which is least, why take ye thought for the rest? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They toil not, they spin not. And yet I say unto you that Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. If then God so clothes the grass, which is today and in the field, and tomorrow is cast into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, O ye of little faith? And seek not ye what ye shall eat, or what ye shall drink, neither be ye of doubtful mind. For all those things do the nations of the world seek after, and your Father knoweth that ye have need of these things. But rather seek ye the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you." And I think we'll pause there. So if this morning you were faced with that reality, If you had only 1 year to live, what would you do? What would you do? See, we can get so caught up in life. And I remember thinking, when we were young marrieds, that, well, eventually we'll get to where we'll go and take a trip. We'll go here, we'll go there. We'll take our family and we'll go on a Western trip or something. Well, the years came and the years passed and we never did the Western trip. There was a lot of things in life, and there's no sin in not taking a Western trip. That's not a criteria for salvation. But what I'm saying is we often think, well, it'll change, it'll change, and it doesn't change. Or life does go on. The first thing you know at our stage in life changed. Life changed. So if you had 1 year to live, what would be the number one thing that comes into your mind that you would want to do before that day comes when you take your last breath? Remember, our disappointments are often God's appointments. Because God has a different plan than we do. The things that we think aren't fair are His plan. The other thing you want to remember is salvation is lived on this side of death. So those number of lists that I had, I would change occupations, I would work less hours, I would pursue long desired skill, and all those things I would diligently pursue and mend all hurting relationships. I would be more gentle. Remember, salvation or the Christian life is lived on this side of death. After death, the decision is made. There's no options there. There's no options there. Because Jesus told us, in Matthew 11:28-30, come unto me all ye that labor and are heavy laden, I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly of heart, and ye shall find rest for your souls. That's on this side of eternity. He wants to do that for us. He wants to hold our hand. He wants to be the one that bandages that sore foot of a man that was a gangster, because we're all gangsters. Or in other words, before we became Christians, we were all sinners. We were all doomed and damned to hell. It doesn't make any difference what our occupation was or how we gained our livelihood or what we have done to others that have hurt others. So as we come to that point of that question again, if you had only 1 year to live, what would you do? Because remember, to prepare to die, we must change our goals in life. That doesn't mean we're going to sit on a rocking chair waiting for God to call us home. That's not what God wants for us either. But to prepare to die, we must change our goals in life. And when you think of it in that way, preparing to die is the most healing acts of a lifetime. Let me explain. In the process of preparing to die, there's clarity, there's insight, and there's closure. There's clarity, there's insight, and there's closure. I remember back in 1994, we were in Belize, in Doublehead Cabbage in Belize, and we were preparing to come back to the States because our term of service was over. When Floyd Stoltzfus and his wife Lil were at Cayo, Belize, and she had been sick, and they went to the States to do some testing and doctoring to discover that she had cancer and couldn't come back. So we asked the church, and the church said it's fine for us to stay longer, to move to Cayo, to cover there until the AMA board found someone to come to take our place. Sister Lil died in November. Floyd Lil, not my Lil. Floyd Lil died in November, and a couple of us couples flew to the States for that funeral. One of the things that Floyd Stoltzfus told me, he just struggled with the fact that as Lil got weaker and as cancer continued to take over her body, how resolute and how resolved and how at peace she was to accept the fact that she's going to die. And he said, I just thought if she would put up a fight, maybe we could win this thing. See, that's clarity, that's insight, and that's closure. 5 months before my wife Lil died, her brother Paul, who had lived in Abbeville, South Carolina, was having his third open heart surgery for the same reason that my wife died. That family had a heart genetic disorder that caused their aortic valve to calcify, which affected their heart. And my wife was the fourth out of the 12 siblings to die from that same heart genetic disorder. When her brother Paul died in Abbeville, we were down for the funeral. And my wife had been down for his surgery. That was 5 months before my wife died. She said, Paul had such a resolute and such a contented look on his face that he was just at peace. He said, if I die, I win. If I live, I win. Now let me interject a side thought here. Beth and I have been married 3 years since a couple weeks ago. August 13th was our anniversary. You know one of the things that we pray for? That God would grant us a number of years together. I feel sorry for her once I'm 90 and she has to take care of this old grandpa. But then the argument that is we look at each other and we say, so what we're asking God is we'd rather stay here than go to glory. Why? Well, that's our nature, right? It is. It really is. But what I'm saying is if I ask God to grant me a number of years of health and here that I can stay here, what I'm really saying is I'd rather be here with my wife than be in heaven with Jesus. And we know that's a play of words. We would all enjoy being in heaven with Jesus. That's not the issue. But the realization that Paul came to is if I die, I win. If I live, I win. And I noticed that as my late wife, Lil, got sicker and sicker before her last surgery, before she passed away, the more resolute or the more clarity came to her life. She was just okay with it. She would flip sometimes. I remember one time we were out cleaning flower beds and she would take her lawn chair and move along with me because she couldn't do it herself. She said, well, we just might well tear all these flowers out and throw them away. I can't take care of them anyhow. So she would flip back and forth. But the resolute was the last time that she left our house on our way to Cleveland Clinic for the surgery, she turned around, literally turned around in the car, looked at the house, and said, if I don't see you again, I'll trade you for my mansion in the sky. Now that's clarity. And if you ask Susan sometime, Lil called Susan to tell her goodbye. That's clarity. That's accepting. That's realizing that this life will end, and it does end. Yes, she would then flip back and say, I can't believe my life is over, I'm only 60. Now, I'm not sharing all of this, and I've shared before with your church over at Stillwater's. I'm not sharing any of this for self-pity. What I'm doing, what I want to do through the rest of my life is the pain that we've went through, and you have gone through pain as well. It may not be the loss of a companion, but we've all experienced hardships in life. Don't let those painful times ruin you, but use them to the glory of God. Yes, they hurt, but use them to the glory of God. So if you only had 1 year to live, I want that thought to resonate in your minds. I don't want it to leave your minds. Remember this, the future is rapidly becoming the present, and the present will soon be the future. Now, unless Christ returns, there's nobody in this building that'll be here in 75, 80, or maybe 90 years at the most. None of us will be here anymore. Even the little girl, the little child. Outside of most people don't live to be 100. So we can safely say in 90 years from now, none of us will be here unless Christ returns. That's the future rapidly becoming the present. Unforgiveness and resentment make a dying person unlovable. I'll chew on that a while. Unforgiveness and resentment make a dying person unlovable. Because what it does is you become bitter and you don't like the fact that my life is going to come to an end. So responding to death brings about a different attitude when we react. Let me read that again. Responding to death brings about a different attitude than when we react to death. Responding to death is the clarity, the insight, and the closure. Yes, we may want to be here longer. We may want to stay here longer. We may feel sorry for our companion. We may want to see our children grow up and accept Jesus as their Lord and Savior. We may want to see them being baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ. We may want to see them enjoy the beauty of marriage, and we want to see their families growing up. That's a part of the fulfillment of life, of what God has given within each one of us. But that's not everyone's choice. That's not all of our choices. And does that mean that God is a wicked God or a vengeful God? No. We just don't understand all the will and the plan of God. And that's, I think, where our faith comes in, that was mentioned in the devotional, is to believe that God has a reason and a purpose for doing what He does. We may never understand that. And especially for you take families where there's young children and there's mothers or fathers in the home, that are taken, and God, you wonder why God. That parent was so needed in that home. We don't know why. We may never know why. But that doesn't mean that God is vengeful. But the power, you think of what Job went through. We say, whoa, well, yeah, but he ended up with twice as much afterward, and he had his 10 children back. I was telling Beth the other day, don't you think he sat down wondering what those first 10 would be doing today if they were still alive? We tend to forget that. Well, no, he remembered those 10 children. He remembered what their names were. He might have forgot how many camels he had, but he knew his first children. So that doesn't mean that God didn't love him. That doesn't mean that we have to sit back there and revel in the what ifs, because that doesn't get us anywhere either. That causes us to become bitter. Responding to death brings about a different attitude than when we react to death. Let me go back into what I said earlier. If that became reality, when you would hear that you have 1 year to live. As Lil's health regressed, and finally her cardiologist said, I think you should go for the Cleveland Clinic for another evaluation and see that we think we should have your second open heart surgery. That's when we left home for the last time to go to to have the surgery. Well, before that, we went in for some appointments that we had with the clinician, with the cardiologist, and with the doctor. We met with the clinician, and we met with the cardiologist, and he did some different tests on my wife, and he said, well, you are a rare bird. That was his exact words. For her heart was the size of a child's heart. It was not the size of an adult heart. And he said he's never seen that before, and this man was quite old at the time. Then when we went to do the surgery scheduling, the lady said, well, who's going to be your surgeon? And Lil told her that it's Dr. Svensson. She said, no, who's going to do the surgery? Well, she said, Dr. Svensson. And she looked at us. She said, do you know that he is the El Jefe of all heart surgeons in the Cleveland Clinic? He had done her surgery 6 years before, but now he was an instructor. He was not even doing surgeries anymore. That's how elite he was. But he had chosen to do Lil's second open heart surgery. So we received some good news and we received some bad news. The bad news was, if you do nothing, you'll have approximately a year to live. And here's what will happen. You will fill up with fluid on your lungs and you will die from suffocation. Now, I don't know if there's any people here that are claustrophobic, but Lil was. And the last thing she would have wanted was to die from not being able to breathe, suffocation. Here was her comment. This here is the clarity and the closure. I would rather die on the surgery table than to die of suffocation. That's closure. That's basically what happened. Yes, they kept her alive for eight days later, but she was in a coma-type state. And he said, it's a very hard death, and you literally cannot breathe. Now, the good news is only 2 to 4% have complications, but still a very invasive surgery. It's a 6-hour surgery and a 4 to 5 day recovery. So there was good news and there was bad news, but if she did nothing, she had a year to live. So, what would you do if it was your wife What would you do if you had a year to live? The reality of this is that every one of us here, and let me just talk to you married couples first. I'll solidify you or pull you apart. Do any of you know where the mom and dad both died at the same time? Now, just recently, this does happen. Just recently, we had an Amish couple in our community. He was the bishop of the church. Had their 14-year-old son with them, and they were in a cart going to, I think it was something going on a Sunday night, and somebody crossed the hill and didn't see him and ran in the back of him and killed the mom and dad. The 14-year-old son lived. So it does happen that both mom and dad die at the same time, but very rarely. Here's my point I want to make. One of you is going to die before the other. That's just facts. That's reality. Now here's the clarity and the insight and the closure. When Lil had her first open heart surgery back in 2009, before she went to Cleveland Clinic to do her surgery, she said, "Now Gary," she said, "I wrote out my funeral plans and it's in a binder in my bedstead. If you want to go get it, well, I'll go over it with you." And she had it all spelled out. She not only had the songs, but the number of the song and which songbook it was in. So we went over it. Of course, she came home. We recovered, and we kind of forgot about that. 6 years later, she said, "Well, if my funeral plans are still in that binder in there in the bedstand." She said, "You don't need to go get it. We went over it the other time, and I just wanted to tell you it's still there." And I made one change. She changed who would have the message at her funeral, because her nephew had been ordained, Nate Zook, and she wanted him to preach the funeral. So she said, "You don't need to go get it. It's in there." That's clarity. That's clarity and that's closure. She wanted to live. The reality is, we don't all get that option. We don't all get that freedom. Or I don't know if it's actually a freedom or an option. I think, to be in heaven with Jesus and be able to be praising His name is a whole lot better than trying to sell food or build houses or sell metal or deliver or fix things or whatever we do for a livelihood. We enjoy our livelihood. We all do. But to be in heaven with God and forever praising His name and thanking Him for that is something to be cherished. So are we allowing things in life to distract us away from looking forward to eternity? Are we allowing things in life to distract us? Is it bitterness? Is it resentment? Is it pride? Is it jealousy? Those things that distract us from what God has for us. So the question is, are you content with where you're at in life? Like I said earlier, there was quite a long period in my life. I thought, well, eventually we'll get over the hump. Didn't really have a plan to get there. Didn't really have a game or knowing how I was going to get there. You just figured with time, things you accumulate more, and the finances could settle down a little bit, and you finally get to that point in life where you've accomplished what you wanted to accomplish. Well, without a vision, the people perish, the Bible tells us. And that's true not only physically, but it's also true in business, and it's also true in spiritual life. Without a vision, we're not going to accomplish what we think we want to accomplish. Why? Because there's always tomorrow. Mañana. We can always push it off. You can always push it off. If we're not content where we're at in life, then why not? Here's another list of 9 things that people say they would do, and some of these are the same, and I found that interesting, but there's one very vivid one that's different. Remember, our disappointments are often God's appointments. So because of that, here's another list of I woulds. You know what the first one was that came up? I would kill myself. If I was given the diagnosis that I only had a year to live, I would kill myself. Now that changes because of our faith. We have something to look forward to. When the day that God calls us home, we have something to look forward to. One is I would get a second opinion. I would love deeper. I would speak sweeter. I remember years ago, soon after we were married, there was an older than we were, lady in church that came to my wife and she said, you know, on Sunday morning, she said, I just wish my husband, instead of sitting in the car tooting the horn, would come into the house and help me get the children ready so we can be in church on time. But you know, when you got to church, that man was the happy-go-lucky, the man that had all his ducks in a row type of opinion. It just looked like they came from a happy home. But she was saying if he would instead of sitting in the car, blowing the horn, if he would come in and help me get the children ready, we could be in church on time too. I'm saying that because I would speak sweeter. So what if your companion did something wrong or is not getting things done right or whatever the list may be? Sometimes it's the most fickle things. You know, they say the people that are most dear to us are the ones that we are often the harshest with. I can be Mr. Goody at work all day long or in church all morning long. I can be Mr. Smiley and I can be patting everybody on the back and I can go home and yang. Why are we that way? But then we go back to work or we go back to church, we put our mask on and we have this imitation that we have all our ducks in a row and we are happy. Let's make that a point to speak sweeter. After all, if it's you that dropped the plate and it broke and it was her grandma's plate and you don't really want her to get upset at you, do we? But for some reason we think we have a right to reciprocate that the other way. I would plan my funeral. I would eat anything I want. Why diet? I would tell people I love them. It's not hard to do. Yeah, it is, isn't it? Sometimes it can be really hard. But we all like to hear it. We all like to hear it. I would enjoy every second. I would eliminate all stress. Sorry, Delbert. We were talking some about stress yesterday and what all that entails in his life. Sometimes it pays to get old. You can slow down, right? So why not live as if you only had 1 year to live? Why are we waiting? Why do we have to go through a catastrophic event in our life to make that decision that I'm going to change some things in my life? Why not change them before? I remember years ago when I worked at a welding shop and this old farmer came in and we were talking about buying or building a new house or, renting a house all your life to build a new house when you retire. He said, well, my generation, we spend all our life saving money so we can build a new house when we retire. He said the next generation builds a new house and have it all their life and get to enjoy it and pay for it as they go. So it's a whole different strategy. Now, I'm not saying I'm not here to teach finances. I don't think debt's the thing we want to do. But what I'm saying is sometimes we kick the can down the road and hopefully eventually we'll get to enjoy it. And life doesn't always end that way. Well, what is keeping you from living these 9 I woulds? I not think we should live the number 1 of I would kill myself. Remember this, that life is about the will of God, not man's goals. It was God's will to take my wife home. It was God's will to take others of you, your companion, home. Why? I don't know. Let me throw a wrinkle in that. No, not a wrinkle, a blessing. I told you that in 1994 we moved to Kiowa to cover for Floyd and Lil because they had to go home. Well, guess what? In 1994, God asked Beth to go to Belize and teach school. She basically lived with us. Didn't sleep in our house, but she ate her meals with us. My wife taught her how to make rice and beans. And I had told her before already, I still have this memory of hearing those 2 women in the kitchen just going off because they both have this spontaneous laugh. If something hits them, you're going to hear it. So did God make a mistake in bringing that all about? I'm not saying we always know who our next companion is, because I didn't. But because of that relationship, we met up again, and now here we get to enjoy life together again in a different way. God does have plans. Remember, it's about His kingdom. It's not about me. And it's never too late to change. Your life will change when you live in the present. Now let me say that again. Your life will change when you live in the present. Instead of thinking, well, tomorrow will be a better day, We'll have more time. Next week or next month or next year, we can take a little getaway, my wife and I. We can enjoy being together again. Or we can take the family and, well, it gets kicked down the road. It gets kicked down the road. I remember, well, yeah. Things that I wanted to do with the children, okay, let me finish the thought. I remember when we were having plans made to take the boys fishing one time, and someone from church called and had said that they wondered if I could come talk to them. So I told the boys we can't go fishing after all, because someone from church had called. They've forgiven me, but they haven't forgotten that. Dad was going to take us fishing, but somebody else was more important than we were. That's often what happens. We kick the most important on down the road, thinking that eventually us boys and the boys and I will have time to go fishing. So remember, there's a finality in death. There's a finality about it. And there's a reality that comes with that. When you're sitting there in that chair and you're watching other people throw dirt in that hole, covering up that casket, that was that person that you lived life with and loved, life is a reality. And when it gets cold and the ground freezes, then you know who's down there. Life has a reality. Now, I'm not saying that you know that that's where her soul is. Her soul is not there. And those of us that have lost, and all of us here have lost someone that's been very special to you. It may not have been your wife or your husband, but it can be, even to a little child, it can be a pet that really meant a lot to them. And we say, well, that's just a dog. He doesn't have a soul. He'll never go to heaven anyhow. No. Remember that pain does come in different ways. So there's a reality and there's a finality in death. In Ecclesiastes 8:8 it says, there is no man that hath power over the spirit to retain the spirit. Neither hath he power in the day of death. And there is no discharge in that war. Neither shall wickedness deliver those that are given to it. When God says it's our time, it's our time. Do people die prematurely? I think it can happen. I can do things that end my life earlier, but it's not that God doesn't know about it and it's that it's a surprise to God. But what I'm saying is to not accept that, I think comes back to the devotional, Chad, where it rocks our faith. Where it rocks our faith if we don't think that God had a reason and a plan for this. We may never understand that reason and plan. So, have you thought about death? Have you thought about being given that terrible announcement that you only have a year to live? Or being killed suddenly like our Amish couple in northern Indiana? Or have you thought about mending relationships in the light of death? Instead of being harsh the next time, can't we say, well, that's okay. If it had been me, I'd have probably broke the whole thing, or I'd have spilt a whole gallon of milk. Or what difference does it make? Remember, the old will die and the young can die. Job says in Job 7:1, he says, and there is not an appointed time. Is there not an appointed time upon the earth? Let me read that again. Is there not an appointed time to man upon the earth? Are not his days like the days of an hireling? Solomon writes about it. So we're here today, the lily blooms, tomorrow it's thrown in the oven, it's cast aside, and it's all over. We're at that stage of this summer where the flowers are fading, they're not as bright and brilliant as they were. Life is going on. And Ecclesiastes 12:7 says, then shall the dust return to the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return unto God who gave it. So let's just forward that a little bit. If it was your companion that was buried yesterday, you're sitting here reminiscing, what would you do different? Because you can go to that grave, and I did, and ask her to forgive me. Now, I know that's a play of words because she isn't there. But it was a reality as close as I could get to her and to tell her that I'm sorry. Or to even ask her if she would want to change what we've all made mistakes. So here's the journey that I was on. The first year I lived on the good memories. The second year I lived on the I wished I would have. And those aren't fun. And it's not a good place to go because you can't fix it. But we can learn from those mistakes. You know, if a man drives 70 miles an hour all the time and he gets about the 10th ticket and loses his license or however many it takes, he's going to say, well, maybe I should reconsider. Do I want to walk or do I want to drive? I can't do both. All right, I have to make a choice. So why not enjoy the journey? Instead of enduring the journey, now the what if comes. Matthew 24, verse 27 says, For as the lightning cometh out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. That's our reality. That's our reality. Soon we will pass away. Remember, the old can die, the young will die. Or the old will die, the young can die. What is God's plan for you and I today? What is His plan for us? Because we don't know. I don't know there's anyone here that has a terminal illness. We're planning to be around a while. Yeah, arthritis may be catching up with me and I may be slowing down, but I don't really expect to die this week or in the next year. I could, but I don't expect it to happen. Is there something that you would like to change if that was in your life? Such as, I would enjoy life more. I would mend bad relationships. And that amazes me, and I'm not trying to pick a scab here because I know you've had some hurts in the past year. But it amazes me how in every one of the questions I had looked at, even the non-Christian, the secular questions, how that comment keeps coming up. I would mend bad relationships. I worked with a man at work, and we go out for pizza about once a month, and he said if it wasn't for my Christian faith, I would have divorced my wife a long time ago. We just endure each other. All we do is fight. If it wasn't for the children, I wouldn't be with her anymore. So he's going to go through life. He's in his 50s now, hating everyone in the world. Well, not quite, but at least not loving those that are the closest to him. What is God's plan for you and I today? I would enjoy life more. I would mend relationships. I would live my life to the fullest. In that CD that my wife had gotten me about had a year to live, it said most of us have a God-given instinct. He called it a natural instinct. I call it a God-given instinct. Something that we're good at and would enjoy to pursue, and maybe because of circumstances in life never did. I remember having a job years ago working at a van conversion factory where I literally hated my job. And on the way to work in the morning, I would literally cry. That's how much I hated going, because I was the only Christian there, and it was, anyhow. My first cousin had a welding shop, and he offered me a job. I took it. One of the men at church said, Gary, you can't afford that. That's half the pay of what you were making. I said, I think we can afford it. To this day, I still love to weld, and the men that I've had work for me at the shop, I love to teach them to weld and to see their response when they can weld something and it holds. Is that my passion in life? Not totally, but I love welding. I enjoy that. So are we really pursuing what is really important to us? Not in a selfish way, but in a godly way. Because remember, let's go back to Revelation 20. You remember the words there. Chapter 20, verse 12. And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before God, and the books were opened. Another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged out of the things which were written in the books, according to their works. Let me finish the chapter, then I have a few comments. The sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and hell delivered up the dead that were in them. And they were judged, every man, according to their works, or according to my work. And death and hell were cast into the lake of fire, which is this is the second death. And whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. Who determines where we will spend eternity? I do. You do. By my works. By my works. And so why not enjoy this journey? In a few years it can change. Some of you know that. Howard knows that. Life changes. We can't go back. It doesn't make any difference how much money you got. Money won't buy someone back from the grave. If you had a year to live, what would you do different? And I think there's thoughts going through all of our mind, something that we would do different. Remember, our life does not have an effect on, remember, our life does have an effect on others. Let me share a little bit more about that journey. In one of the hardware stores that I would go to a lot, one of the women there that was working there, I had told her that we were going to Cleveland Clinic for my wife was going to have open heart surgery, and she said, well, I'll pray for you. Well, that's an easy comment, right? She's a Christian. So it was about a month before I went back to work, and we went back to town after the funeral. And I walked in the hardware, and she said, well, how's your wife? I said, well, she passed away. I literally thought she was going to go to her knees. I mean, she dropped. To this day, 9 years later, if I walk in that hardware, she'll say, I prayed for you this morning. So if we share our life, others can bless us. When we were getting ready to go to Belize this summer, Delbert, I went to one of the other hardware stores, and the lady there that's a Christian, I was telling her we're going, and she said, well, I'll pray for you. And she walked away. Pretty soon she came back. May I pray for you now? So, well, sure. So we had a prayer meeting there in the hardware store. What I'm saying is, let's do the things that are important. Let's make priorities. Tomorrow's going to be another tomorrow. There'll be more jobs, there'll be more groceries, there'll be more whatever it is. And I'm not saying that we need to be not being diligent in what we do, but let's keep the priorities straight. Let's keep it because remember in Romans 14, he says, every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess. So when we get to glory and I have all this baggage with me and I say, well, it's because of this and because of that and because of this and because of that, I couldn't do the will of God. God's going to say, no, what? Why couldn't you? Excuses aren't going to get us past God. It doesn't work in court today, and it will not work in that court when we stand face to face. Let's live our lives as if today was our last day on earth, because it may be. Let's stand for prayer.